show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and now streaming live on YouTube too, youtube.com/@theteam980. Streamers, sorry, didn't hit the button. That's a 15-yarder on me. Put it on the fine board. Do that in the next break. Talking though, and wanted to let you hear before we talk to you. We got a couple people already calling in, 301-230-0980. But talking about Rivera clarifying his comments, which I think was smart, to be very, very clear. I do not have any problem with what he did yesterday, except for the one problem I pointed out, which is I didn't like the comparison between himself, Del Rio, and Bieniemy, which is something, by the way, that Rivera agreed with. Ron Rivera might as well have listened to my opening monologue yesterday and went like, yes, that is correct. I screwed up there. I don't get why people are doing this here, and I wish everyone would stop being so damn dramatic. That said, people were that damn dramatic. People did take exceptions in all different kinds of ways with what he shared with all of us, and thus it is his responsibility to clean up that mess that he unintentionally made and perhaps should have known that he would make, and in that way should have known better. Again, you have to deal with what should be and what is. What should be, we should all be grown-ups, and when people tell us the truth, we should be able to go like, oh, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing. This is good. This is a sign of healthy, good, positive communication happening. And what should be, which is people don't do that. We have to live in the world of the world of what is, and that is the world of what is. So Rivera, before even taking questions today, stepped to the podium, made the rare opening statement. Here was Rivera today.
We know that we're trying to build here, and we're all aligned. As I've said many times since I've hired Eric, I love the overall message that he gave to the team his first day, and that was basically we got to learn to be comfortable when we're uncomfortable. And I think what's happened is for those guys on that side of the ball, things are uncomfortable. There's been a lot of change. And the entire way of doing things has changed on the offensive side. Change is hard, and I've always encouraged our players to have great dialogue and build relationships with our staff. Since those conversations took place with Eric and the players, I've seen the improvements. And I can honestly say that the last couple of practices probably have been the best of training camp, which I think is great. To me, that displays the team is beginning to embrace the message and approach to how he does things and how we want things done. I also want to clear up the reference I made about Jack in comparison to Eric. I did not communicate that correctly, and I met with Eric. We had a great conversation, and that was cool. I think the biggest thing is that we're all on the same page, everybody. I'm fortunate to have an experienced staff, guys like Eric and Jack, and a roster of players who want to help this franchise take the next step. We're all working to build a culture where players and staff can respect each other's point of views and the way that we do things and continue to be very professional with one another. At the end of the day, we're all a family and we're working towards the same goal, and that's to win. I just wanted to get that out there so everybody understands I wasn't as clear as I probably needed to be, and I own that, and that's on me.
Bravo! Hey! Good job, Ron Rivera. You took responsibility. That's your job as a head coach. You owned the part of it on the negative side. That was not very good. All in all, though, he reinforces the message, which is what the meat of that answer, the substance of that answer was, yeah, guys did have a problem with some of the ways in which they were being coached because it was different and it was new. But that's exactly why I brought Eric here. They came to me. I told them to go to Eric. They talked it out. They have learned. And now look at us flourishing. That's good. That's how coaching works. And I love that he also reinforced Eric's message that you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because when you grow, there's going to be a point where it's comfortable or it's uncomfortable because it's outside your, wait for it, comfort zone. Like if you want to lift heavier weights, eventually you got to lift them and it's not going to feel very good. Or you're going to have to lift more of the same weights you've been lifting to get a little bit stronger. Won't go too far into the science here, but one of those two things is going to have to happen. You're going to have to find a way to overload your body. And that's the same thing when you're pushing to get better as a football player or as whatever. Like you're going to have to do things that you haven't done before that are harder, that are more challenging. Otherwise, you're never going to actually get the growth. You can't do the same things and expect different results. And so there is an adjustment period that happens. During that adjustment period, some players had some questions. They ultimately got the answers. And that's good. Rivera asked, I believe by Cakes, John Keim, why he would mention his comments from yesterday and kind of like why answer the question in the first place.
I think just to show the difference in who they are. You know, one guy's experience is different from the other guy's experience, but we all do things our way, and we all have the same goal in mind, and that's to win. And I think the best thing about it, too, is our players have learned, you know, their communications with our coaches has really, I think, has been a big part of why you're starting to see the improvement, because everybody understands why we're doing these things, what we're trying to get accomplished, and that's important.
As I said yesterday, like players going to a coach and being like, hey, I don't really get it, is a good thing. Continuing to not get it is a bad thing. And so if they're going to Ron and they're like, yo, this dude's like yelling at us, we're going a million miles an hour, I don't really get what's going on, I don't get why, like, I don't feel like I'm learning, I don't feel like I'm getting better. And they're like, he's like, go talk to Eric and he'll tell you all of the answers to your questions. And then that happens. Again, cannot stress this enough. Feel like a broken record. That is a good thing. Now, as for Ron airing it in public and how players are, you know, then potentially thrown under the bus. Again, I don't believe that, but certainly some did. Some fans, some media, some whatever other people that are commenting on this. And how all of the player side affects this. Here was Rivera, kind of talking through that and the player concerns with Bieniemy in general.
I think the biggest thing more than anything else is everybody just wanted to know why. You know, what's he trying to get out of it? And when you understand why people do the things the way they do them, and you look at the end result, that's the important thing. And the best part is we're seeing them. You can't deny yesterday was a good practice, can you?
For your
No, I just asked you the question. Okay, don't be afraid of it, though. Come on. I mean, from my perspective, when I watched practice yesterday, I was very pleased. And I think a lot of it is because guys understand what we're trying to do. And that's what I think is important. And they understand it because they've had open dialogue with them. And that's the thing. I mean, honestly, the articles that were written yesterday, and I saw a couple of the headlines could say, oh, the players understand. The players are getting it. You know what I'm saying? Instead of what they said. And if you sit there and you read it and you go, wow. But it's the same thing for you guys. You get a new editor comes in and he's going to be different, and you got to go, oh, wow, why does he do that? But then all of a sudden you see why, and you go, whoa, I get it. Well, that's what's happening. We're having these aha moments. And it's because there's been open dialogue. It's because guys have come to him and talked to him about it. And that's what is really appreciative, is that guys are willing to talk, and Eric's very honest and very blunt and very upfront, which I think is great. Because we all know where we stand, and that's the most important thing.
I used to be, when I was growing up, and I lived a bunch of different places around the country, and I listened to a lot of ESPN radio back in the day, and Scott Van Pelt used to do a show with Ryan Russillo, and they had a game called Headliner Storyline. And basically the idea was, like, you take the big stories everyone was talking about, and you're like, is this just a sexy, splashy headline? There's no substance to this story. Or is there actually something to talk about here? Is there a substance here? Is there a storyline? Is this something worth watching? To me, the way Rivera just put that is actually the point here. The headline is because people, are in the business of making people or click on the story and hopefully actually reading it, is players went to Rivera to complain about Bieniemy. The storyline then explains that those complaints were met with a proper adult response, adult conversations, and grown-ups solving problems. But if you never read the story, then you don't know that. And you just comment on the headline, which, to Ron's point, and I feel weird, like, defending Rivera on this. But again, like, most of his comments sounded like he listened to the show yesterday and then said the things that I said. Like, it was a little too on the nose. So, Ron, if you're listening, hi! To Ron's point, if you had just had the same story with a different headline that says, Bieniemy-Rivera and players resolve conflict, move forward together, you don't have to change a word of the story. But you've now framed it completely differently with a different headline. And all the facts remain the same. And that's why, to me, this is a big, giant nothing burger. This has gotten national attention. One of the people who was talking about it nationally today was Kimberley Martin of ESPN. She also did some actual reporting and called people and did the things that good reporters do. before going on TV and just talking about it after reading a headline. So we'll talk to Kimberley about that coming up, kind of what she did, what she learned, what she thinks of it, what she thought of it yesterday, what she thinks of it now, coming up at 5 o'clock for Not My Beat. I also talked to Logan Paulsen about this story when we Take Command literally an hour ago, and we're going to actually let you hear that early today. So that's coming up later on in the show as well. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll take your calls on all of this next. We already got a couple folks on hold. If you're on hold, stay there. I promise I'm going to get right to you. But now is the time. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Streaming on YouTube at the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show, Team 980 on YouTube at the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Time to take some calls. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. Again, top of the hour, we will have Kimberley Martin from ESPN talk about this story and her expectations for the Commanders this season. Let's get to the phones, though. Right on, 301-230-0980. That, of course, the brand new Ace Law listener line. In a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. Darren's with us here to get us started. Darren, you, sir, are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig, how you doing today?
I'm doing well.
All right. I'm going to say my thoughts right quick, and I'll take it off the air, Craig.
Okay.
Like me, I think Ron Rivera is not very articulate with words. I believe he's a tough man. He tries to be tempered when he gets to the microphone, and then he's challenged with this thing where he has to be diplomatic, all things that most tough men ain't good at. Make no mistake about it. He is a tough coach. When he was coach, he wasn't head coach. Yeah, there's stories about it. But Jack Del Rio, part of it. But that being said, if I was Eric Bieniemy, I would call the offense into a meeting, just the offense only, and I would say, look, y'all, my career moving forward is on the line. I'm in it to win it, okay? Y'all haven't done nothing lately. What have you accomplished? Nothing, okay? If we're going to gang fight the guys against the street, and I'm creating a gang to go against that gang, I want tough guys with me. If you're not tough enough to tough it out, you're not willing to fight for your careers, then get the H off my team. Let me know right now. I'll take it off the air.
Well, hold on, Darren. Actually, I don't want you to take it off the air. I want to... Oh, and he hung up! Tough guys don't hang up, Darren! I just wanted to have a conversation.
You look so sad, man. You need to turn that frown upside down.
I need Darren to call back. He made some interesting points that I wanted to parse out. They're worthy of discussion, analysis, other stuff we do on the radio. I should probably start talking about them before I lose my train of thought because my ADD is very real. Okay, I'll get to it. I think calling an offensive meeting is not hard. They have offensive meetings all the day. So if they want to address this with the offense, they could. I do not think it is productive to tell a room full of the best athletes on the planet, you have not done anything yet. You have not won anything. You suck. And not that you would necessarily say you suck, but Darren kind of almost went there. Y'all ain't accomplished anything. Wait, I think someone's calling back. Is that Darren? Is that the Anthony? We got to see. We got to see. Is that him? It's Darren. Hey! We love to see it. Anthony, stop talking to him. Put him on the phone. All right, Darren, thank you for calling back. I appreciate it. I wanted to parse out some of what you said. Although I do appreciate your willingness to take the answer off the air instead of scream at me, which some callers I think that's what they call to do. What I was saying is I actually don't know, pretend you're in the room and I'm Eric Bieniemy and I look at you and be like, you ain't won anything. You haven't done anything. You're actually who are you? Do you think that would actually would you feel good? Would you want to play for that guy? Or would you just be like, this guy doesn't think very highly of me. Why am I even here in the first place?
Yeah, I would want to play for that guy.
Okay.
Playing football in Woodland and Southeast D.C. and coming up and playing at Ballou, we had tough coaches. And, now looking back at it, I thank God for those guys. There wasn't a team. Ballou only has 3 Turkey Bowl championships, and all three of those teams had a Holbrook on it. And we were all coached by the same coach. And they were tough coaches, tough money. Coach Mo, they were tough guys, man. Yeah. No nonsense guys. And
so let me ask you this though, Darren, about that toughness. Did you know that they cared about you, or did you think that you were disposable? Did you feel like they cared about you through that toughness?
Oh yeah. With the problems we had, the social problems we had in our homes, yeah.
And so that to me is the line here, right? When we talk about toughness doesn't have to be callous, right? Toughness can also be caring, which I think Bieniemy's excellent at, which also gets to what I think is getting a little bit misconstrued here about this situation. Because if I tell you, hey, some of the leaders on this team or whoever it is went to Bieniemy and was like, hey, man, I want to be as good as you want me to be, but I don't understand what the hell you're telling me to do. I actually don't see that as a lack of toughness. I see that as being tough enough to have a frank conversation with your coach and be vulnerable enough to be like, yo, I need some help so that I can get to where you want me to go. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I see what you're saying, but I think some of that sensitivity will diminish if they are tough guys. If they are tough guys, they've been. But
I guess what I'm saying, Darren, is I don't understand how that is sensitivity. To me, that is just that's understanding, which is important because especially if you play, how mental and how not mental emotional, how mental intellectual this sport is, how assignment based it is, right? And so to me, it's not even about sensitivity.
You know how Coach shows his love for you after he grilled you all week? It's when you make that touchdown, or you make a good play in a real game, not practice, in a game, and you come to the sideline, he pats you on the helmet twice, or he tap on the rear. That's how you know he really loves you.
I hear you, and Darren, we now got a couple more calls, so I appreciate you calling back. Thank you. But if you don't know your assignment, you can't score the touchdown. And, I think what we are talking about here is two very different things. These are not players that are looking to be coddled. And I'm not saying there aren't some of these in the league. We talked about this with Santana yesterday. Are there dudes that have not played at the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the big-time schools where, they were the biggest fish in the pond and, the coach designed their entire program to make sure this guy didn't leave in the transfer portal? Yeah, there's some of that that's happening here. But I don't think this is about emotional coddling. I think this is about the fact that these guys were getting grilled and they didn't understand why. And if they don't understand why, they can't go out and execute, which means, yes, you're going to get yelled at again, but it's because it's not about not getting yelled at again. It's about not making the same mistake twice. And what happened is, according to Rivera, these players went to him and then ultimately Bieniemy. Some probably did go straight to Bieniemy. We just didn't hear about those because we didn't ask Eric about that. But I'm sure there have been plenty of those conversations. In fact, I will say I saw one yesterday on the sideline. I saw Brian Robinson talk to Bieniemy on the sideline and be like, hey, I needed to take this route here, right? And they had a conversation very quickly because it's between plays, and Bieniemy's like, no, just hit this there. And B-Rob's like, okay, cool, got it. Those conversations happen too. I think sometimes when people don't hear about something, they assume it didn't happen as opposed to that they didn't hear about it. Well, how could he have never? They did. Oh, well, now I'm still mad because there's an emotional trail to my feelings, but damn be those facts getting in the way. But I think what we're talking about here is not this soft, sensitive, whatever. I think what we're talking about is this is a new offense that is very wordy. There's a lot happening, motions, different formations, different personnel groupings, guys lining up in different places, an attention to detail with the route running and the blocking schemes and the tracks out of the backfield, because I don't know what position it is. I don't know who made these complaints, so I don't know what element of the game. But there is a higher level of detail that has ever been demanded of them, even if they played at Alabama. And thus, some guys are struggling to grasp that stuff. And it can feel defeating. And instead of getting defeated, they ultimately went to Bieniemy, got understanding, and now they move forward in a much, much better place as a football player and thus as a part of a better football team. That is good, and I will not back down off of that. There are other points being made. There are other discussions being had. We can continue to have them. But I firmly believe at the core of what we're talking about is what I just described. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. Let's go to, Anthony, should we break, come back, and take these calls, or should we just run a little heavy here and take them now?
You can take one.
All right, let's take Dean real quick. Ron, I love your call. I see it on the screen. I just want to leave more space for it with what you want to talk about next. So, Ron, don't hang up. Dean, go ahead.
Because if you ran a corporation, you'll be a good dude. You'll be a good dude to work for because you know what you're talking about and you ain't dealing with the BS. We're talking about ego right now. We're talking about ego. We're talking about three different eras of time. We're talking about Ron, his time of playing football. We're talking about Eric Bieniemy's time of playing football. And we're talking about we're dealing with these prima donnas that we're dealing with right now, okay? Teaching these kids how to play football.
What makes you think that they're prima donnas?
They're prima donna because they were getting everything given to them since they were little kids. These guys are alphas. We got Chad. What's his name? Chase Young on our team right now that knows exactly what he's capable of doing and where he's come from. And from Ohio State, all these guys that get to the pros, they already have gotten a silver spoon to their dinner table. They've got it all. They've already got it. Look, my problem is this. They already exposed themselves by not knowing who Eric Bieniemy is. Okay? Eric Bieniemy was an outstanding, almost a Heisman Trophy candidate running back. And he played with another Heisman Trophy guy and another Heisman Trophy guy.
And?
These guys need to toughen up.
Like, what does this have to do with toughness? That's just what I don't understand.
It has something to do with toughness because they're dealing with, coach, I'm not pleading the way you want me to do it. No, do it the way you got to the where you got to the pros, man. Do it the way you're supposed to do it. Do it the way football is played. Football's only played by one way.
No, it's
not. It's
not.
by being tough.
No.
Football's being tough.
But this has nothing to do. Okay.
Tell me how you play.
Dean, we're up against the clock, and you refuse to answer the question. Just flatly refuse to answer the question, which is, what does this have to do with toughness? And then you scream about a bunch of other stuff that has nothing to do with toughness. You want to know why? Because this actually has nothing to do with toughness. Silver spoon. You don't know the backgrounds of most of these dudes. Trust me, a lot of these dudes did not grow up with silver spoons. And by the way, the most quote-unquote silver spoon dudes on the team, the guys who were high-profile recruits, the Bama guys, like John Allen ain't a prima donna. Deron Payne's no prima donna. Terry McLaurin had to earn his way at Ohio State. He was damn near going to have to walk on. Urban Meyer made him earn it. Like, I don't know who you're talking about. Like, if you want to say Chase, sure, but we're not talking about Chase. Chase plays defense. We're talking about offensive guys. How many 5-star recruits do they have on their team on offense? Like, if you want to have the cojones to call out professional football players as soft, when they go, yeah, they're handsomely paid for it. But when they grind and push their bodies to the absolute limits of human performance so that they can run into each other full speed 17 times a year for your entertainment, go ahead. Just know those of us with more self-awareness think differently. Take more of your calls next. 301-230-0980. Again, I will hear the toughness argument if you want to actually make a toughness argument. Yelling louder is not making a toughness argument. More calls next on the Team 980.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Nationals in action. Actually, I believe Nationals are off tonight, I should say. Had the doubleheader last night against Philadelphia. No, I beg your pardon. They are on final game of the series against Philadelphia tonight. 6:40 is your first pitch. Former Vegas receiver Henry Ruggs III had that fatal DUI a couple years ago, finally sentenced for that today. 3 to 10 years for the former Alabama star. That is what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too, youtube.com/@theteam980. A couple folks popping off in the chat. C-Man says, EB is a man on a mission. Let's go. That's the thing. I don't disagree with the mission. I don't disagree with how EB is doing anything. I think it's great. I think it's great that he's pushing guys. They needed it. This offense was so lackluster, so failed on attention to detail, so failed on tempo, so failed on creativity, so failed on everything the last 3 years. That doesn't really counter any of the points that a lot of other people that seem to be very mad about all of this are making. But just to be very, very clear, in case I have not, there's not a lack of support for EB and what he's doing, or even the way he's going about it in this particular chair. Let's go to Ron. Ron, appreciate you holding through the break there. Go ahead. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Thank you so much, Craig. I appreciate you and your YouTube cast, and I love it. So my issue is the players are going to be players. They're going to complain, and that's just what happens. But Ron Rivera revealing it and putting Eric Bieniemy out there like he did, that's the issue I have with it. Bieniemy was passed over 16 times for jobs. Finally, the 17th time, he got the job with the Commanders, and I think he wanted a head coach job, but he accepted the assistant coach because he needed to get out there and show his stuff. So from the moment he got here, people have been talking only. He screams. He's loud. It's like he has no other capacities that makes him the person and coach that he is. So we know people have doubts about him, or else he would have been a coach right now. We already know people have doubts about him. So putting him out there like that, I think just brings his name in a light where it's just a questioning thing. And, of course, he's going to have time this season to prove who he is, what his mettle is, and whether he belongs as a head coach. But I'm just saying right now he hasn't had an opportunity to do anything, and the coach should have left that as an in-house issue. That's my only thing. It should have been because African-American coaches, if they happen not to make it that first time, very rarely do they get a second opportunity to do it. So my thing is that that's the thing I'm concerned about.
Ron, that's a fantastic call. I really appreciate that. I'm going to respond to it by mostly saying that's a fantastic call with a lot of really good points. It is why I think if you want to criticize Rivera and say there's a way to portray this that would not have caused the firestorm, I will at least hear you. Again, I think that is a far bigger reflection on us, on media, on fans, on the ecosystem around, because to my core point here, what was described was competency. What was described was humanity. What was described was a way to create better outcomes. But the way in which it described certainly was going to cause a firestorm. And I do think it is Rivera's responsibility as the person who was like, yes, Evie, I will help you get to that next level, to make sure that he doesn't get in the way. And I do think something that I saw like Nikki Javala do this, that I thought was great on her Twitter account the other day. She's like, just so people are clear, like Evie is way more than yelling at people. Like, he does yell. Like, let's be very clear. Eric's voice is loud. It carries it, which is a good quality in a coach, especially when you're one who likes to watch from 30 yards behind the play. You need to have clear communication. But Eric can have one-on-one conversations, and I've seen him do it. He calls guys over, and he's like, hey, let's talk about this. I don't know what they're talking about, because it doesn't happen very loudly. He is also, what makes him special is not the intensity. What makes him special is not the yelling. What makes him special is not some of these things that even some of the folks, quote-unquote, defending him are glorifying him for, the toughness, if you will. What I think makes Eric Bieniemy special is he understands football at an extraordinarily high level. Like, the man is a borderline genius when it comes to this stuff. In order to have his attention to detail, you have to understand that level of attention to detail, frankly, even beyond the one you're teaching your players. Like, he could talk football at a level that would spin all of us in circles, because we don't exist in that world. Someone like Logan Paulsen could do it, because Logan made a 10-year career out of the fact that he was that level of a thinker. a conversation between a Logan, a Sean McVay, a Kyle Shanahan, and Eric Bieniemy, and Andy Reid. I would imagine a guy like DeMeco Ryans on the defensive side of the football, as someone who just coached under Kyle and now got the Houston gig. Like, I'd imagine he could exist on that level. That's what makes those guys special. And I think that there is a disservice in some of this conversation about these very intangible things, about people screaming about toughness, that loses the point here. What Eric Bieniemy is incredibly brilliant. A man with an extraordinarily high standard, but also someone who cares and whose players, even if it takes them a second to realize it, will very quickly come to realize that he cares. If I had to pick 4 attributes for a head coach or for a coach of any kind to coach me how to create a spreadsheet, that would be the 4 things. Caring, knowledgeable, effective communicator, like those, that's the list. And so I appreciate Ron's point a lot because there is a little bit of forest through the trees here where the perception becomes the reality, and other owners who have ESPN on in the background of their offices in their team facilities or wherever it is they keep an office just see the controversy and they're never reading the story. They're not getting past the headline. They're probably watching it on mute. Like, we're going to talk to Kimberley Martin next. They never hear Kimberley. They just see the thing on the bottom that this guy is caught. There's been some controversy about this guy, and it's an excuse not to hire him. And in that way, that is a disservice to Eric. That is a disservice to EB. And if you want to have that be your criticism, I not only hear that, but I sign off on it. I rubber stamp that. Really, really, really good stuff from everybody here on the phones. We might be able to get back to a couple more calls later. If you want to comment on the YouTube stream or comment on Twitter, whatever you want to do to get in touch with the show, go ahead and you can continue to leave some of those, and we'll read them later in the show. But next, we will talk to Kimberley Martin from ESPN, who not only has been commenting on this story all day, but did some additional reporting around it. So we'll get her insight and analysis next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
The Kevin
tried to warn you, bro. It is a mess in downtown Nashville every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Not even
we moved hotels the next night. I still am waiting on my refund for that. But yeah, we moved hotels the second night.
Wow.
It was fun. You say they rely on them. We went to brunch with my buddy the next day, who is a Nashville native and has lived in Nashville long enough that he remembers when it was more than just the bachelorette capital of the world. And he's like, yeah, we're pretty much on the woo girl economy.
Yeah, that's precisely what's going on. The downtown businesses cater to that. If you try to get it shut down, you're probably the one getting thrown out. It is what it is right now. It's weird, but Nashville, baby. What are you gonna do? Yeah. So I will add one more small part to this story, and this is the part, frankly, that I've been waiting to tell you all week as well. That was kind of part one. We got quality Yates reaction. Part two, as we leave the hotel the next morning to go to breakfast. Remember, the wall's very thin. So it's not going where you think it's going. But as we walk down the hallway, my dear sweet wife just starts saying in a slightly elevated volume of voice, you know, it's been proven that the later groups stay out and make noise and all this stuff at their bachelorette weekend, the higher the divorce rate. Oh God! In the wedding, so and also the better chances, basically. And also the better chances. Wow. Okay. Okie dokie. So Rachel was pissed, basically.
Yeah, she doesn't have a lot of tolerance for the woo girls. They say on the internet, like, feel free to post stuff, like your friends' photos, do whatever. But like whatever you do for your own well-being, don't read the comments. Comment section, bad idea. What do we do?
We read those comments, baby.
That is exactly what we do. That was a little bit better. I still feel like that one was a little muted. I think sometimes it feels like you build yourself up a little too much, and then sometimes you don't quite go for it.
Because I ain't want to go screaming all the way. The thing is, though, my mic is a little lower than yours, so maybe I could have actually, did what I really.
Mic also moves. You can go, ooh. Did you know you could play tricks with a microphone?
I think I'll try that next time.
Okay. You want to give it another shot?
We read those comments, baby.
There we go. All right. I feel ready now. It's the Hoffman Show, 5 o'clock here on a Wednesday on the Team 980, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980, and of course always live on the free Odyssey app. 5 o'clock means that we talk to an expert on the story of the day. It is time for Not My Beat. Or for Anthony's computer to freeze. Yes, maybe, nope. Going intro list today, Anthony?
The computer just didn't fire. I don't know. Let me try this other computer.
All right, you try it real quick, and if not, then we're just gonna go forward. All right, just make sure all the pots are down that would fire. That way, this doesn't fire in the middle. And with that unceremonious introduction, it is my pleasure to welcome in my friend Kimberley Martin from ESPN. Kimberly, I'm sorry you don't get the very fancy intro. Sometimes the computers.
What in the heck was that? What kind of intro was that, guys? That is sad and disappointing.
It is one that quite literally now has Anthony out of his chair and out of his studio going to talk to the engineers. So that is, sometimes things happen. It's live radio. You know how this goes on live television. We just keep on trucking forward. So you have been talking about the same thing that we have all day. You've been talking
all
about
day on TV.
This Eric Bieniemy-Rivera story. So let me take you back to yesterday. You first see it. You see probably a headline first. Yeah. As you start to look into this story and do some actual reporting on it, what do you find? What do you think is interesting? What do you think is important about this?
Well, I made sure Nikki Javala, who works for the Washington Post, had tweeted the whole quote. So I made sure to read the whole quote. And by the end of the quote, I was like, what in the heck is going on here? Because it didn't make sense, because I felt like that's interesting. I've covered the NFL a long time, even in Washington, and head coaches, they don't tell us a lot. They tell us what they want us to know. It's a lot of stuff they keep in. I was like, why is he even saying that players were complaining or there was, rumblings about Eric's intensity, number one. Number two, I was a little surprised that Rivera said when guys came to him, he said, well, talk to Eric. Let him know how you feel. Because I know that Ron Rivera specifically brought Eric Bieniemy in there because he knew that what was being done on offense wasn't good enough, that the intensity wasn't where it needed to be, the tempo, the pace, just there wasn't enough, dog in this offense, right? And they just weren't good enough on offense. So that's why Eric is here. So I in my mind, if I'm a head coach and guys are complaining, I would say, hey, man, you should feel free to talk to him, but let's make it clear. This is literally the reason I brought him in here. That's what I expected Ron to say. And then thirdly, the craziest thing to me was throwing Jack Del Rio in there. What he has to do with this, I don't know, especially since Eric Bieniemy has more Super Bowl rings than Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera. And he's won them more recently and been around a Super Bowl caliber offense more recently. Now, again, the reporter in me, the beat writer in me, instinctually says, let me get to the bottom of this. So I was making calls. I talked to a lot of different people in the building. I knew yesterday it was a non-issue in the building. I knew that Rivera had apologized to Eric Bieniemy. Essentially what he said today, which was, I completely put my foot in my mouth. That was not what I intended. That was not the spirit of what I was trying to say. And Eric, he's a cool guy. He's like, listen, man, I understand. It's not a big deal. And it's not internally. But I think because of who Eric Bieniemy is, given the fact that he unfortunately has become the poster child for equities in how the NFL conducts its hiring practices for head coaching jobs, that Ron Rivera talking about Eric and undermining him as he's trying to praise him, I think it ends up being a polarizing topic because we know that Eric Bieniemy, given his just strictly off his resume, should have been getting a head coaching job just off of merit alone. If Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy have gotten jobs coming out of KC where they weren't the primary play callers because Andy Reid was there, then you would think that those two, Eric Bieniemy winning Super Bowls would give him a leg up in those conversations with teams.
You would think.
What you would think? But here, Craigie, here's what I found funny today, because I was doing Get Up today on ESPN, and I said Ron Rivera is going to talk to the media before practice, and he will let them know I messed up yesterday. That is not what I meant to say. And Ron did. However, Ron brought out a piece of paper, and that's where I was like, ugh, I get it. I get why he has a prepared statement, because yesterday he was just talking off the cuff, and he put his foot in his mouth. So he wanted to make sure that he got his message across the way he wanted to. But with something like this, it just looked like it wasn't heartfelt again. So it almost was like 2 days in a row where it's just not quite right. And it seems fairly simple to say, you know what, guys, yesterday I messed up. Here's the deal. I love Eric Bieniemy. I brought him in here to change the culture. It's going to be a culture shock. Yes, sir, but that's what we want. Eric wants guys to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and I want that too, and that is it. Now let's go to work and practice. That's all. You know what I'm saying? It didn't have to be like a typed out statement read from a piece of paper. If the sentiments yesterday was really, I like Eric, and to be fair, I was told the complaints about Eric and stuff. It was early in camp, first week of training camp. Guys were like, man, this guy goes nonstop all the time. Whoa. But since then, tempo's been better. Practices, offenses look better. Guys kind of see where Eric's coming from. But Eric has said, listen, this offense needs to be better. Sam Howell has to be up to stuff. And Sam Howell is a guy who takes hard criticism, wants hard criticism, seeks it out. So this conversation and this whole Eric Bieniemy-Rivera thing actually gives me more confidence that Sam Howell, this could be a good season for him. Because if Sam Howell wasn't rubbed the wrong way by Eric Bieniemy's tough love, tell it like it is, I think you need that. I think it's time. Like, this is a good roster. But guys, you got to have those dogs. Like, when it's playoff time, like, you got to be able to win games. You got to be able to put up points. And I think Eric is coming from Kansas City where they're used to winning. That is it. And that is what needs to come to Washington.
Kimberley Martin from ESPN is with us here on the Hoffman Show. So this will probably surprise you, but I was on the this is not a big deal bandwagon yesterday and very much remain there because I think what was ultimately described was a process that worked. Like, players were like, damn, this is different. This is intense. And Ron was like, go talk to Eric. They talk to Eric. They ultimately get to the result they want, which is they're on the same page. And like you said, they're improving. I do think that the criticism, though, of like the delivery from Rivera, which was characteristically bungled. And, you know, if you want to say more honest, I'm never as a reporter going to be like, oh, yeah, that guy's too honest. Like, I don't want people not telling me the truth. Covering Belichick sucks.
Right.
Like, I want people to be honest. I want people to be forthcoming. And I want people to be insightful. And I guess where I struggle with this, Kimberly, is like, I think sometimes we hear things and we go, oh, everyone's going to make a big deal out of this, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think ultimately if we understand what Rivera meant, I don't see why it's that big of a deal to just go like, yeah, no, they seem to have a good feedback loop. Excellent. They're moving forward. They're getting better. They're growing. And why this became such a kerfuffle, except for, and I promise I'll end this in a question, not just lobbing opinions at you, but like, except for the part, and we had a caller who said this in the last segment I thought was really good, which is the perception of Bieniemy. Do you think Rivera has kind of an elevated responsibility here because of Eric's path, because he's been passed over, that like, yeah, man, what you described was good, ultimately for Eric, but you have to understand how it's going to be perceived, and you need to be thinking ahead like that. Is that the error ultimately here?
Yes, 1,000%. Especially, again, like I mentioned, bring up Jack Del Rio. Like, I've heard Ron Rivera defend Jack Del Rio against all sorts of different types of tweeting that he's done in the past and comments where you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And Ron Rivera has literally defended Jack Del Rio. Like, that's his guy, and that's fine. But in this situation, context is everything. And as a head coach, because part of Ron's message and what he was saying was like, Eric's never been a head coach. You know, Jack and I have been head coach. You know, that's
yeah. And for clarity, that was the one part that I crushed him on yesterday. I was like, you can't, like, what is that all about? That part was nuts to me.
Right. And so part of being a head coach is understanding we're all human. So it's not killing Ron Rivera for making a mistake necessarily, but it's an important lesson here as far as understanding Eric Bieniemy just doesn't move as Eric Bieniemy. Like, he represents a larger conversation, unfortunately for him, and how they're like, it just seems like at every turn there seems to be added criticism with him that doesn't exist for other people. Because when we talk about culture shocks right now, the culture shock isn't just happening in Washington. It's happening in Denver, where Sean Payton is, is talking about, I don't want guys who are done playing preseason snaps and sitting there with their Gilligan hats on. They need to be focused. And it's like, dude, it's preseason. Like, if we're, there's a culture shock happening in Arizona where players have said, whoa, this is pretty intense. We're not used to this. Like, this is what happens when teams aren't good. They bring in other people who have an attitude of, we're going to do this my way now. And so I think Ron Rivera's failure was just not understanding the full context and how in trying to praise Eric for being this guy who, like, he stands firm, but he also has to learn to relax. Like, it's sort of like you're critiquing a guy who you literally brought in for this sole purpose, which is to kick everybody in the butt on offense and get this going in the right direction, because we know how good this defense is. We need the offense to match up. But I think it's not an issue internally. It wasn't an issue yesterday. It's not going to be an issue. And I think the interesting thing is Eric Bieniemy is saying, listen, I'm going to be judged on the job I do. It is a difficult task. The offense is his. The same way Ron Rivera said, hey, man, go talk to the assistant head coach. Go talk to the OC. Let him know how you feel. it's on Eric Bieniemy's shoulders to make sure Sam Howell is ready and this offense is ready. And that's why Eric Bieniemy is like, I'm going to go 120 every day. And clearly players weren't ready for that. But I think players need to be ready for that because you have new ownership. You have a team that's been on the cusp of play, being good, playoff, like gets in the playoffs, loses. And right now it's about building a winning program. And, like, you got to have sustained success. And Bieniemy has seen that. So hopefully this is a non-issue going forward. As far as the public perception, depending on how the season goes, and it's clear that Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy continue to be in lockstep because this team needs them to be in lockstep, and all these players need to get on board with the culture shock that's happening in Ashburn because it is long overdue.
Totally. And there are very human growing pains that are going along with that, which I think is what Rivera ultimately described. But, like, the question is whether or not you get through the growing pains. But along with that has been this, and that's the barometer of success or failure. You either get on board eventually and you win, or you don't and you lose. There's kind of no other option. But there has been kind of this commentary about, well, actually, these growing pains mean these players are soft. And I'm very curious on your perspective on that, because you talk to so many coaches, so many players, so many agents, not just here, but throughout the league. And some of this is just like generational differences in communication. Some of this is just like, I don't know, fans expect fingers to be snapped and things to be fixed. Like, I don't know, and not just fans, some media. Seems like some former players think that that's how it works too, and maybe it did in their career. But, like, is there kind of this, I don't know, like, what do you make of the soft narrative? I don't have a better way to ask it.
So I did say this on First Take today. I said when I read the comments at first, my first thought was like, man, these players are coming off really soft. Like, what? Like, really? We're complaining about, like, oh, he's riding us too hard. Like, what? Like, you guys have not. Right now, it's like in the NFC East, we're talking about the Eagles and the Cowboys. We have no idea what the Giants or the Washington Commanders will look like. That's the reality. We don't know how good either of those teams will be. And I know that I know, like, Terry McLaurin, like, I know these guys aren't soft, right? I know, like, offensive players, like, I get it. And I understand all players and here's the other part. All players kind of complain in training camp. Like, right. Like it is part
training
of
camp
it. Is
sucks.
part of,
it's
like,
hard.
Right. It is part of just, like, the rite of passage. Like, you go through training camp. This is why so many guys are like, you know what? I'll just sign. The free agents are like, I'll just wait till we're closer to week one. I'm not dealing with training camp. I'm good because it sucks. No one wants to be there. No one wants to do it. It's just a necessary process. That's why I was a little surprised that he mentioned it, because Ron, coaching for as long as he has literally heard players complain about training camp for years, right? But I don't know. It's not just Washington complaining, because, like I said, in Arizona, guys were complaining about it. In Denver, guys are like, damn, like, Sean Payton really is, like, taking this, like, this is his show. This is no longer Broncos country, let's ride Russell. Like, it is Sean Payton's world there, right? So there is going to be a culture shock. I think what made me feel better in all the conversations I had yesterday afternoon and last night was that the I don't say complaints, but, like, the whining or whatever it was, it subsided, because guys get it. Having talked to Eric, they understand the motivation. It may be different from what they're used to. And it's a different generation of players. The interesting thing is, what do you do if you're an old school coach? If you're an old school coach like Sean Payton, do you want to hear guys whining when you're a coach who's used to the two-a-days, and now players don't even do two-a-days and they're still complaining about the rigors of training camp? Do you really care? It's like, do you want to win, or do you just want to compete? What's the answer? Because if we bust our butt now in August, if we focus on the fundamentals, if we get our mind right now in August, then that should hopefully alleviate some of the growing pains that you might see in September. As long as players buy in, as long as they fully understand that there's a method to the, quote, madness, Washington should be straight. They really should.
So, and that's kind of where I landed when I read the comments more. To me, it spoke to less of like a toughness and, softness or whatever. And also like Eric's yelling, they're running 100 plays of practice. I feel like guys just didn't get it. Like, didn't get what their assignment was, didn't get what they did wrong. And like, it felt like some of the aha moments and the understanding also were tactical. And I'm curious from your conversations, like I'm reading between the lines. You were able to talk to some of the people involved. How much of it was that as well, where it's like, yeah, dude yelled at me because I did the thing wrong and I still don't understand what I did wrong. But now that, Ron's like, well, you should go talk to him. They do. And now some of that understanding is not just about we're running this tempo for conditioning or for mental toughness or for whatever some of these almost intangible reasons are, but some of it actually being tactical in nature. And that's going to be a part of the growth and hopefully success of this Washington team.
I think part of being a coach, position coach, assistant coach, OC, head coach, is sometimes you can't coach all the guys the same way. People have different personalities. I was a kid who, like, starting at like 4 and 5, my favorite question was why? Like, why is that? Why is that? Like,
stunning.
You would have to make it shocking. You need to make it make sense for me. And it used to drive my mom crazy. But I think there are players like that as well. Like, what is this about? Why am I doing this? Now, if I were one of Eric Bieniemy's players, maybe I'd be like, what the hell? Why are we doing this? And he might bark at me. But if part of it is understanding where Eric comes from, like the man he didn't come from, I'm going to pick, what's like a terrible team? Gosh. I don't want to do this today. Like, it's not like he came from some like bottom of the barrel team and just came over and you're like, why am I listening to this guy? This man literally spent games talking to Patrick Mahomes. This man literally months ago just got his second Super Bowl ring. Like, there has to be some sort of ownership on the players to get on the same page with the OC as well, and understand that whatever was done in the past or whatever you were used to is not what it's going to be now. Same way with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Like, guys, their wide receivers are talking about, Aaron, it's kind of hard to read his mind. Like, sometimes, like, we'll go up to the line of scrimmage and then the play is this, and then he'll just say, like, oh, wait, with a hand signal, I'm going to change it. And we're like, what? Here's the thing. You don't have time to be confused. You got to get on Aaron Rodgers' page because he's the guy that will make this thing go. Same thing in Washington. Like, Eric Bieniemy, you got to get on his page because he's letting you know that we're going to do this my way, but there is a reason. I will be your biggest advocate, but I will be your toughest, like, critiquer because we know that – because I've seen this works. So I think what Ron was good about was encouraging dialogue. I think the more times players talk to their coaches, know their coaches better from just man to man talking to them, woman to woman, if there's females on the staff, like, I think that goes a long way in building the relationships and building a solid foundation so that this man isn't just riding me to ride me. He is literally trying to help me and this offense get better. And so I think they'll be okay if these guys totally buy in.
Totally. And it's what I appreciated about Eric's comments yesterday because he was like, yeah, I'm cool with it. I got an open door policy. They can come in and talk anytime, and I'm happy to tell them why. So, like,
Eric Bieniemy will tell them exactly what Eric Bieniemy feels.
Yes, and possibly he will reference himself as Eric Bieniemy in the third person. That was spectacular yesterday. I was happy to be there, sitting there, listening to that. Kimberley Martin, ESPN NFL Insider. Catch her on Get Up. Catch her on First Take. Catch her on SportsCenter. What NFL Live? Anything else you got coming up today?
No, thankfully you are the last thing I'm doing today.
Nice. Nap time.
I've been up since 3, so watched Hard Knocks last night, so I've been up for a while. So, yeah, but I'm glad I can cap my evening off with you.
I appreciate that. We miss you around here, but great to look up and see you on TV. I always get super pumped. Like, hey, that's my friend. That's another one of the Syracuse Mafia up there. Kimberley, always appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Craig.
Kimberley Martin, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Really good stuff. Really great insight. When we get back, I don't want to say it's the opposite of Kimberley Martin, the insightful, thoughtful reporter who does all of the research, has all of the insight. But, Anthony, next is never read the comments. Next is the comments section. Is that the opposite?
I think it's going to get interesting today.
I think it could get spicy. Never read the comments next. Our pick 6 at 6 coming up at 6. And then you'll definitely want to hear Logan Paulsen's take on all of this at 6:30 here on The Hoffman Show. Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Sang it, Anthony. But silently, so that no one has to hear you. Because your singing voice is not good. Anthony would be incredible at karaoke if he didn't actually sing. Like, what you need is someone who is, like, scared of performing. They just hide behind you and do the actual singing. La, 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 la. And then you to be out there belting out a song, pretending like you're singing.
Do you know how artists like mics cut off sometimes? I think I will excel in a moment like that, where like my mic is off and I don't necessarily know and everybody else doesn't know, and I'm out there just going, being animated.
Yeah, I think that could work. I mean, let's try it. Me, you, karaoke night. No, I'm just kidding. I hate karaoke. So it's a long story. The short version of the story is I worked as a DJ when I was a teenager, and when we had to do karaoke, those were always the worst nights. Because there was drunk people. Like when you're going to a party, it's just drunk people who want to sing the same 4 songs and are terrible at it. And we had to set up a bunch of other equipment. And they would, when it was time for them to sing, it would ruin the flow of the party that we had going. It's a personal thing. Me, karaoke, some scarring there. Don't need to get into it further than that. What we do need to get into, though, is what happens at 5:30 Wednesdays during training camp. It is time, Anthony, to throw caution to the wind. It is time to dive deep into the darkest parts of the internet. I almost made 3 other analogies, and I was like, I don't want to do that. That sounds gross. It is time to read the comments. I do think that's despite the fact that they say don't do it. Do not read the post, whatever you want. Do not read the comments. And yet, Anthony Haney, every week, every Wednesday, what do?
We read the comments.
Yes. Yes, we do. That was a nice change-up. I like that.
Yes, sir.
Just when you thought we were zigging. Zag. All right, let's do it. Into the comments section we go. I can't imagine what people commented on. By the way, just real quick, people really enjoyed the content covering the Bieniemy stuff. Let's see, where we at now with the numbers here? Yesterday we talked to Santana Moss on the show. We're at like almost 8,000 views on YouTube in less than 24 hours. I posted that when I got home last night. So people definitely locked in on thousands of views on the callers, on my opening rant yesterday. So if you missed any of the show yesterday, we'll put Kimberley Martin up in a few minutes. She was fantastic in some of the stuff from today, youtube.com/@CraigHoffman. But let's dive into the comments on it. A lot of feedback, I would say, on both sides, people agreeing and disagreeing on my take from yesterday, which is that ultimately what Ron Rivera described was a competent organization. I think the more I've thought about it, and in talking to Kimberley and taking some calls, like there was a clumsiness to Rivera's comments that I can acknowledge and that I think clearly caused some of the issues. But ultimately, like what he described was a good working process. But people, I think, saw through some of the BS commentary that I think a lot of people gave and agreed with what I said. Someone says, here. Someone else, Hermit Rob says, that's my thing. Ron brought Eric in knowing full well what Eric's approach and methods were. While he didn't completely throw EB under the bus, he didn't really have his back either. No, look, I brought Eric here for an offense scoring 19 points a game, and that's what he's doing. Not Jack and I are more mature since we've been head coaches. Same old wishy-washy Ron from where I sit. Good dude, but much more suited for an upper management role. I think like that, the Del Rio comparison, which Ron today went back and apologized for, like that was definitely the worst part of it. And he could have more explicitly backed EB, but like he very clearly backed EB. When someone comes to you with a problem, like let's say I go to Anthony, or Anthony comes to me with or goes to our boss with the problem, and our boss is like, go talk to Craig about it. Like Anthony's got a problem with me. That's an implicit endorsement of me. Like, yeah, no, he can handle it. He's got the power. Like, that's what happened. The endorsement of EB was Ron saying, go talk to Eric. And, like, then saying, yeah, when they talked to Eric, they were enlightened. That's an endorsement of Eric. I guess it could have been more explicit, but largely I just don't have an issue with how all that went down. Steve says, great perspective, Craig. To coin one of your phrases, it's a big nothing burger. Rivera did nothing but speak the truth. Players tend to blow things way out of proportion. Someone else, Andrew, says, thank you for shouting this perspective. I agree 100%. Have been riding this train all day. Lots of other people saying nice things. Good grief. People just need to stop being overly dramatic. But there's definitely also a lot of people that disagree. Off to Another World 7434 says, completely wrong. It's the very reason Ron found himself reading a speech this morning. Ron even admitted that he was going to quote, take his foot out of his mouth. He undermined his assistant head coach, placed himself and JDR above EB, and basically told all 32 team owners that EB wasn't head coach material yet. This is the part that I think I have thought more about. But again, even to the extent that I agree with that criticism, it is about people seeing the reaction more than what Ron initially said. If people had just looked at what Ron initially said, taken the substance for what it is, putting the Del Rio part aside, and said what Ron Rivera described was a players going through very human growing pains, then me telling them, go talk to Bieniemy about it because I endorse what he's doing. So why do you think I brought him here? And those players ultimately learning and adapting, like, then we wouldn't have this big kerfuffle in the first place. I think sometimes problems create themselves because people, like, feel like they need to make things a big deal. And I just didn't think this thing on its face was a big deal. But I will hear this. Artie Life says, why are you not acknowledging Ron's fault here? I have a hard time understanding how you're missing this. He should have never said anything about EB not having head coaching experience. He made the players look soft for questioning EB's practice philosophy. The media would have nothing to speak on if Ron didn't open up a can of worms. Everything has been going great for this organization after the ownership change, and Ron goes in and blows everything up. Now players are going to be questioned by the media about EB when the focus should be on camp. It's unneeded negative attention that this organization doesn't need. There is a reason Ron apologized. Like, half agree with that. First of all, yesterday I said the comparison to Del Rio and him is stupid and wrong, both for making it and because I think substantively it's wrong. Like, I actually don't think Rivera and Del Rio's approach is better than Bieniemy's. I think there's something to the rigidness of the standard that Bieniemy holds and a realness and a consistency to him that I, if I was a player, would appreciate. He did not make the players look soft. This is the piece of criticism that drives me the most nuts. Nothing Ron said made the players look soft because the players aren't soft. The players don't know what it takes to win. That's not softness or toughness. That's institutional knowledge. Like, you don't know. If you talk to NBA players who have won championships or have lost championships, they will tell you, even if they had been to the conference finals 3 times and the semifinals before that you don't learn what it takes to win a championship until you do it or you lose. And you realize how freaking hard it is because round after round in the playoffs in the NBA, it gets harder and harder at a level that's just hard to imagine. You think you're playing your hardest. You think that you're giving it your all. And then the game demands more. And that is what it's happening in these practices. Bieniemy is like, yo, I know what it takes to win. So player A, you better meet me on this level. And the players are like, damn, this is hard. And by the way, like we just talked about with Kimberley and Martin, training camp is always hard. Training camp sucks. It's brutal. You're running into the same guys doing the same stuff every single day. It's not particularly mentally stimulating. It is physically grueling. It has no redeeming qualities. It just is hard. And so players saying it out loud is just acknowledging a reality that is human. And so I'm not going to call people soft for being human. What I think is soft is if you quit. Nobody's quit. They got on the page. They're moving forward. Soft, you quit. Soft is you shut down and you quiet quit, if you will. You don't go have the conversation. You don't understand why you're being asked to do a certain thing. Seeking to be better is tough because it's a path of more resistance. It's a path that potentially includes conflict. Just shutting down, collecting your check, that's soft. Don't get it twisted. It's not the other way around. Let's see. Who else we got? People calling me soft. Matthias, 23, Abel. Hoffman, you're part of the problem. You're soft as hell, too. Grown men getting paid millions of dollars to play a game should not be running to another man about another man being too intense. They could have approached EB himself if it was a problem. Many of them did. And guess what? When they approached Rivera, they were told to go to EB and did. I also don't understand how the money factors into any of this. A lot of folks would do a lot better in life and be a lot happier if they quit counting other people's checks. Because when you run into another human being in full pads at 20 miles an hour, doesn't matter how much money you make, that hurts. These guys are used to it. They don't complain about that part of the game. Or when you got to run another wind sprint, or you got to run another go route, the money doesn't insulate you from it being hard, or from the injuries, or from whatever, and it doesn't insulate you from interpersonal interactions. You know, in big law firms, people get paid a lot of money. It's an intense work environment, and there's a reason that lawyers have the highest rates of depression, suicide, and drug use. They get paid a lot of money. Doesn't solve their problems. And for football players, it's the same thing. They have the same problems. The money does not make you not a human being. Yes, there are certain things that you probably shouldn't complain about because you make extraordinary amounts of money, and even the lower end roster guys, right? We're not talking about just the guys that make $15 million a year. If you're making $800K a year as a rookie as a 5th round pick, for most of us, that's a pretty big freaking check. It's way more than my check. I don't even want to say how much more it is than my check. It's a multiple. Let's put it that way. Significant multiple. What an end of roster rookie minimum guy makes compared to me. Okay, that's fine. But it doesn't mean that they're all of a sudden any less human and have to deal with problems in some kind of way. I just don't get the soft thing. And also the demands of their job are way higher than most of us. The amount of people that get to do that is so small, and the margins are so thin. And at times they're even subjective. It's one thing if you make the team and you produce or you don't, but where the ball goes in terms of the opportunities is based off whether the coach likes you or not. And if he doesn't like the way you do a certain thing, even if it could be effective under another coach in a different system, or even would be effective if he would just get over himself. And I'm not saying that specific to Bieniemy. I'm saying that to other coaches that I've seen. Just let the guy do it his way. It's successful. It works. And that guy never gets to play because the coach doesn't like it. These are the types of things that you deal with in the NFL. And if you think that, are there guys that just can't handle it? The stress is too much. It causes their performance to suffer. They're not, quote unquote, mentally tough enough. Sure. Is that why most people fail in the NFL? No. It's not for a lack of want to. It's not for a lack of try. It's because playing the game at that level is so extraordinarily hard. You have to be literally the best of the best of the best. And that's why people fail. Not because they're not tough enough. So I don't have a lot of respect for opinions that throw those kinds of things on NFL players. Continuing with Never Read the Comments here on the Hoffman Show. Kind of thoughts on the style of Bieniemy as well. Santana had a really good analogy yesterday about kind of the fire that gets lit underneath you. This is a good sign. It says C. Kreider, 5793. Coughlin, Parcells, Lombardi, Marty, they all moved the chains, irritated people in one. This is a sign things are about to get better. Here's the thing about coaches that have, well, two things. One, coaches that have that toughness, that they're tough love coaches, if they don't also have a caring side where players know that they care about them, which is something, by the way, Bieniemy has and Coughlin also had, they don't have a shot. Players will tune them out so fast. You have to show players that you can help them be better. And if it comes with a lot of tough love, if it comes with an extremely high standard and not a lot of positive reinforcement, but you can genuinely help them, they'll be fine with it. They'll buy in. But you better be damn good at the job. Because in order to teach anybody anything, and that's what coaching is teaching. And in order to teach anybody anything, you have to have a student that's willing to learn. And so this is, I think, part of the frustration with some of the back and forth that's happened with Bieniemy is people heard that some Commanders players were complaining, and it's like, do you know who Bieniemy is? Bieniemy is the guy with the rings. Why don't you just automatically buy in? And there's some truth to that, but it only goes so far, which is why I'm glad Bieniemy had the conversations, why I'm glad that he's continued to, be him, which includes this openness, not just the toughness. And like I said earlier in the show, I also hate that Bieniemy, is getting reduced to just this, fireball of intensity and toughness when he's so much more than that. He's a full human being, family man. He's someone who is beyond brilliant, which is why he has the attention to detail and actually knows how to coach to the standard that he does. Andy Reid doesn't really hire dummies, and he certainly doesn't employ them for the better part of a decade. So I hope people realize that Bieniemy, what makes Bieniemy great is not just the intensity. What makes him perhaps different from some other coaches, certainly offensive coaches that have been here, is the intensity. But if you're intense and not intelligent, then you get found out real fast. And there are plenty of those coaches around the league that are just hard asses and aren't actually any good. So I hope that people see Bieniemy more than just this very narrow scope. Even if they're trying to defend him, I think sometimes he gets put in a box that's actually not remotely close to big enough to accommodate what he is as a coach in terms of his overall skill set. S.W. Mullins made a comparison to his own workplace experience, which is something I think I did analogously in one of the segments yesterday. Had problems with the new boss, sat down and talked to him, not his boss. End of the day, he was the boss and we did it his way. He said, you want to do it your way, then work hard enough to get on my level. You can't complain or whine to get what you have, to work mentally, spiritually, physically. I'm convinced it's a generational difference. It's impacting all facets of life. I'm not stupid nor naive nor ignorant enough to say that there aren't some generational differences at play here in how people talk, how people communicate. Maybe where it used to be a phone call, it's a text message, or it used to be an email is a text message, or maybe it's circling around now to a FaceTime. There's literal methods of communication that are different. There's also styles and, kind of cares and emotional needs that perhaps were ignored. But I would argue this, if you played high school football for some tough coach that you're like, that's how it was for me. Did you actually enjoy it? Did it actually help you? And for some, maybe. But I guarantee you probably also have a good relationship with that coach and that you knew that they cared about you. They weren't just abusive all the time. And by the same token, if you had a boss that's my way or the highway, or you're going to get fired, I guarantee that boss did not get the best out of you. And so why is that the go-to example? Oh, well, I had it this way, so that must be the way that it is. What if I told you there was a better way? What if I told you that collaboration can often be a good way to work with people? That, sure, there are days and certain assignments and certain things that they have to be done a certain way. A lot of people like to make military analogies, and I had a couple of veterans comment about their time in the Marines, the Army, whatever, and I don't like the military analogy because in the military, part of the deal is you do not question the chain of command, because when you're in combat, questioning it means you might not execute, like you're spending mental energy and time to not execute the task, which could be the difference in life or death. When you're preparing for a football season, you're not in a life or death situation, and there is time not necessarily to question the chain of command, but to question the plans and improve it and make it better. If the ground line soldiers, the folks at doing the fighting were in the planning meetings, then yeah, maybe there would be time for them to give some feedback on the battle plan. When you're out there executing it, you do what you're told because the decisions have already been made, which is why if you got players in the huddle trying to yell at Eric Bieniemy, like, I don't like this, from the huddle when the play call comes in, that's a different story. Training camp, OTAs, meetings, this is the time to be collaborative. This is the time to work together. I think too many people are relying on, frankly, bad experiences in their own lives to try to justify something that also, frankly, isn't even happening. To defend something that they are projecting onto what Ron Rivera said and what Eric Bieniemy did and what these players did or didn't do. That just seems very silly. That there's a bit of a misery loves company thing where your football coach in high school where you won 4 games, or your bad boss who you actually went home and complained about every night did things a certain way, and for some reason that's the example you hold on to as a justification for whatever it is you're trying to justify. Some very interesting comments, that's for sure, in this week's edition of Never Read the Comments. You can leave yours at Craig Hoffman on YouTube. Of course, we also stream live at the Team 980, and full episodes of Take Command at 106.7 The Fan. By the way, I did think this one, Anthony, was very, very funny, so we'll close on this. At I Smoke Hip Hop Clips. I just read what's there. Craig, are you an attorney for Ron Rivera? You're making too much excuses for him. Too many is what we need. I wonder why. Everybody agrees Ron threw Eric under the bus. You are fake. I know if it was Eric that said those comments that Ron said, you would have had a field day. Let's go in reverse order. I would not have done whatever you said. I would have not have had a field day if Eric said that. I am fake. Anthony, am I fake?
I don't think so.
Ow. I think I'm real. For those that are listening on the radio.
Yeah, you're real.
I just smacked myself in the forehead and now have a mini concussion. Everybody agrees Ron threw Eric under the bus. Actually, that's not even the biggest criticism. Most people were criticizing Ron for throwing the players under the bus as soft or thinking that the players were soft. So we're 0 for 3 now. Craig, are you an attorney for Ron Rivera? Anthony, to go back to the paycheck thing. I know how much attorneys make.
Man.
I know how much I make. I clearly am not an attorney for anybody. This is the law firm of Hoffman and Haney. We provide you with sports takes daily, but no legal defenses. If you get in a wreck, you can call Ace Law, the Ace Law listener line. 88 Ace Law. It's right there on the sheet of paper to remind me. Thumbs up. All right. Let's never read the comments here on this Wednesday. Coming up next, it is our training camp. Pick 6 at 6.
You can...
Here's what we need to do right now. I'm tired of hearing about this basketball game. We're scheduling this game
he challenged me.
You challenged me. Don't say I challenged you.
Either way.
I came.
No.
into
Don't either way
No,
this.
I mean-
Because you know what you sound like? You sound like you're trying to weasel out of this.
Yeah, he is, Craig. He knows
There's no
what he's
weaseling
doing.
out of the actual playing of the game. I'm not worried about that.
11 a.m. Saturday, right?
All right, 11 a.m. on
11
Saturday.
a.m. Saturday.
God.
There's two.
Six.
And one.
Guard up the nail.
Little recap?
It was somehow worse for Linnell than I thought it was going to be.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Is the Ron Rivera apology / the Ron Rivera everything with Bieniemy the last couple of days? Something or nothing, according to, not me, according to Kimberley Martin. If you want that, rewind, 5 o'clock. Logan Paulsen, stay tuned. You will hear our discussion about the topic from Take Command, which you, I don't believe, can hear anywhere else yet. This is a special sneak preview of just part of the episode coming up at 6:30. Right now, though, 6 o'clock. We've done this each and every day of training camp. It is our Pick 6 at 6. We pick the 6 biggest storylines of the day from Commanders camp. Today, a light day of practice. Not really much to report on the actual practice front. Of course, the big story was Rivera, and also Jack Del Rio spoke today. Also, a pretty important guest was at practice. We'll get to all of it over the next 20 minutes. First and foremost, Ron Rivera apologized for what I would say were clumsy comments. Could have been better, but ultimately, again, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. But he apologized, which I think was the right way to handle it. Seeing how it blew up, certainly the right way to approach it. And Rivera read a lengthy opening statement and then took questions about everything, but certainly most of them were about his comments yesterday, and kind of the style that EB had was amongst those questions. Here's Rivera's answer.
I was just trying to convey that we all have our own way of doing things. And neither one's better than the other. I mean, I had Buddy Ryan writing me for 2 years. I had Mike Ditka writing me for 9, and it's the way they did things. Their approach is completely different from mine. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that we're all different. We all have our ways.
Last thing I'll say about this today, of course, again, our conversation with Logan coming up at the top of at the bottom of the hour, but I think what Rivera did today was really good. And I think what Kimberley Martin said when she joined us at 5 o'clock is really important. No one in the building thinks this is a big deal. Bieniemy's not hurt by it. Players are not hurt by it. No one that she talked to, and she talked to a lot of people, is hurt by this. This is not a big deal moving forward. Some of the comments that we didn't read and never read the comments were just like, I cannot wait for this stupid thing to be over. This feels like a throwback to chaos of years past. Let's get to Friday. Let's get to football. And it doesn't have to be the chaos of years past. But I also think fans need to be real about the fact that the reason we all love sports is not just because of the games. There's a soap opera element to it, and that's unfortunately or fortunately because it's part of what we love. When it's fun. It's fun when it's other teams. You get to recklessly speculate without any emotional investment. Or it sucks when it's your team and it's like, I just want peace and happiness. There's still going to be stuff like that with new owners. It happens. Why? Because there's humans, and humans are messy, and there's going to be drama. All right, moving forward for today, hopefully the stadium pursuit will not be messy. If it's up to Wes Moore, it will be the least messy because they will just stay in PG County. The Maryland governor was at practice today, spoke to reporters, said, of course, he would love for the team to keep playing their games in Maryland.
When you're watching the energy that's happening right here around this team, and you're watching the energy that we're seeing right now in the state of Maryland, I mean, this is a perfect marriage. The Commanders are an incredibly important and vital part of not just our economy, but part of our culture. And so we know that this is going to be a championship team going forward. It's exciting about the new vision that the new ownership has and coming on board. And I think it really does correlate and correspond well to how we're thinking about things in the state of Maryland. So we are excited for them to be able to build and grow and win in the state of Maryland.
There was Wes Moore, of course, in Virginia, where the practice facility is, talking about it. He was in a Commander's jersey, by the way. I think Youngkin, when he was there, went the more traditional politician look. I can't remember if he went button down or polo, but Wes Moore went jersey. I don't know what Mayor Bowser would wear to practice, but Wes Moore went jersey. And Wes Moore, I'm guessing wearing a suit in his office in Annapolis or somewhere around, has had conversations with Josh Harris about keeping the stadium in Maryland.
Yeah, so we've already been having extensive conversations with the new ownership group, and I think there's a shared vision that it isn't just about creating a winner on the field, but it's about how we creating winners off of the field. How are we thinking about driving entrepreneurial activity, creating new businesses, making sure there's transportation assets that can ease the experience for people to be able to go to the games and get back from the games. So we've already been having extensive conversations, and I'm excited about where they are, where they're going, and that we have an exciting shared future.
So I think that's really important. I'm going to stop down for it for a second because, Anthony, I was at FedEx Field this weekend, and the Beyonce concert was a disaster from a getting in and out standpoint. Like, the concert itself was the opposite of disaster. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen and will ever see in my entire life. But getting to and from sucked. It's not that bad if you can avoid traffic coming from D.C. Like, honestly, getting to FedEx is not that much harder than getting to RFK if you're by car and if there's no traffic. But on game days, that's not how it works. So, like, we got lucky that we got out of the stadium pretty quick and, like, it was home in 30 minutes. Like, not that big of a deal. But there are people that probably didn't make it home that if they just had parked in a different lot and got caught in the mess getting out, they would have made it home for 2 hours after the show. We happened to park in somebody's driveway outside the stadium, and we Venmo'd them. But the parking is very expensive. Getting in and out is a disaster. And because of the lack of public transportation, like, there's real issues in a major city where a lot of people don't have cars. Like, getting to and from games is hard, and it sucks. So, making sure, and that's the part where, like, I'm not a guy who believes in giving public money, taxpayer money, to billionaires to build stadiums. If you got enough money to buy a $6.05 billion football team, I hope you have enough money to buy the house to house it. I don't need to help you. But I would like to be able to get there. And that's where I'm willing to give you a little bit of money if it's a part of another line, right? Like, it's not just for the stadium, but maybe you build a metro extension to get to FedEx Field. Like, how hard would it be to have a direct shuttle service of some kind, or like kind of a loop around that goes to FedEx Field on game day, and you can have extra trains and, like, accommodate the traffic flow? Like, there are engineers, like people with really advanced degrees, that can figure out how to do this stuff somewhat efficiently. Somewhat's a relative term. There's only so fast you can get 80,000 people out of a stadium. Or 60,000 people, or whatever they're going to average this year, and however many, ultimately, who knows? Could they take some of the tarps off and reopen some areas of FedEx? Maybe. So maybe it gets back up to 80. Point is, like, it's a hard math problem, but it's one that has better solutions to whatever the hell they're doing right now. And I think that is where the state, both Maryland and Virginia, if they're going to get involved here, obviously D.C. has some of this stuff that's already in existence, but would need to dramatically be revamped and enhanced to make it so going to a game is not a bad experience before you ever step in the stadium, and not instantly something that wasn't worth it when you leave. Because I don't know, man. When was the last time you were at FedEx?
Last time I went to FedEx, Commanders game, actually. I took my parent. Actually, it was the Giants game.
Last year?
Yep.
How was getting in and out?
That
was a game that people actually went to.
Yeah, people were actually tailgating and everything, and it was, like, really cool. But I'm pretty sure I sat in my car for a good, like, 15 minutes because nobody was moving. And I left, after all the fans had left, because I was in the media booth. So I was hanging around a little bit, letting people walk out, and I still had to wait 15, 20 minutes just to get out.
Right. So. And imagine that there's people that have been sitting in their cars in front of you in whatever line you got in that had been waiting for an hour. Like, I remember I went to another concert like 2018, 2019 at FedEx, and literally we just got out of the car. It was like, July, August, whatever. And we're just like, we're getting out of the car where there's no point. Like, we're not moving. We're just going to sit here. And we, like, sat on the hood, waited 45 minutes for traffic to start moving. And then, like, at the time, I was living in Reston, and then I had to drive an hour back to Reston on a crowded beltway. The beltway's crowded anyway. So the point is not to just complain about traffic. That's the Chris Russell Show, 1 to 4 Eastern here on Team 980. That was a cheap shot, but it was worth it. Love you, Rooster. It's not just to complain about traffic or complain about the ingress, egress. It's just to say, like, these are the kinds of things that the state and the government involvement, because they're infrastructure projects, Infrastructure Week, becomes very, very important. And I'm glad to hear Wes Moore already talking about them as he visited camp today. One more from Wes Moore. It's important, obviously, to have the support of the legislature. He talked about that, but I want to play this last bite. In terms of a timeline, this is where Maryland has the biggest advantage because they already own the land in Maryland. So what would be a timeline in Maryland for a new Commander Stadium?
Well, we see the timelines. We're moving now. If you look at our last legislative session, just in our first month of being in office, we've already allocated $400 million that's going towards the Blue Line Corridor, which is the area right around the stadium Prince George's County. We are not waiting. We are not delaying. We are not stalling. We are letting people know right now that we want the Commanders of Prince George's County, and we're going to move aggressively to make that the case.
All right, there you go. Governor Wes Moore at practice today. On to some football. A very quick, brief answer on the way out of Ron Rivera's press conference today. Playing time for the starters Friday against the Browns.
Sorry, for Friday, you guys have determined how much the starters will play as the quarterbacks will take.
We have.
You're afraid that you will share that?
No.
Have you determined it?
We have.
Will you share it?
No.
Okay. Well, damn. Thanks for the insight, Ron. I think that Rivera and company will play their starters kind of in the way that most teams do these days, which is to say, if it goes well, not very long. If they struggle, they'll go back out there, which will spark the annual freakout when Sam Howell takes his third straight series and you're like, get him out of there. Because what's happening is this calculation between the risk of injury and the risk of not being ready for the regular season. And I like the Mike Tomlin approach, which is we can't live in our fears. I saw that quote today from my friend Brooke Pryor. Apparently it's an kind of an annual thing that Tomlin says. We can't live in our fears. AKA, we're going to do what we got to do to get ready. We're going to optimize the getting ready. And if people get hurt, they get hurt. Like, that's football. They could get hurt in practice. It doesn't mean we don't practice. Obviously, a game is slightly less controlled, but it is what it is. And so they're going to go out there. I think it's important to, be out there and get the reps and see different defenses, get used to going through the process of getting ready for a game. I actually, in some ways, think preseason is more important for defensive players because it's the only time you ever get to tackle. You don't get to practice, like, the main, I don't know if it's the most important skill you have. Like, coverage is pretty important in the modern NFL, but one of the 5 most important skills that you have, if not 3 most important at all, because you're not allowed to tackle. You can only do it on dummies, but to actually tackle human beings, I think is important. And so, ultimately, I think you'll get a pretty quick quarter or less drive or 2, and most 3 for the defense. I think you wind up getting 2 to 3 drives for the offense, unless they go on an opening drive that's like 14 plays, 80 yards, ends in a touchdown. In which case, pack it up, see you in Baltimore. But that's Rivera today. They have decided they will not share. Fine, we'll figure it out on Friday. Sam Howell, of course, going to be the biggest thing that everybody's watching on Friday. What are Rivera's expectations for his quarterback? It's number 4 in our training camp, pick 6 at 6.
I think the biggest thing is when we get on the field, more so than anything else, is going to be his command in the huddle. And then his command at the line of scrimmage, and then his decision-making once the ball snapped. That's what we're looking for, is to see how he handles all those unique situations.
Yeah, if you like the thing that would make me have the biggest concern, I actually did Natalie, who's the new anchor at ABC7. We taped something today that'll, I think, air Friday for Sports Talk. And she asked me, like, what's the sign that things are going well? What's the sign that things are going really badly for Sam Howell? And the way I answer that question is this, kind of an offshoot of what Rivera just said. If there's a bunch of pre-snap penalties, if there's really bad decision-making, and if there's a bunch of guys that are lining up in the wrong places, confusion, just a lack of command of the offense, it doesn't look like it's functioning. That is a 5-alarm fire. That is a really, really bad sign. And frankly, to me, would be a sign that says Jacoby Brissett needs to get snaps with the ones in joint practice against Baltimore, because he might start for me week 1 of the season. I do not anticipate that happening. Sam Howell has shown a great resiliency throughout training camp. He has shown a very, very good command of the offense. He has had no more problems getting in and out of the huddle than Brissett has. They both had a couple at times because of the wordiness of the offense. And frankly, it hasn't even been Brissett and Howell necessarily. It's been the offense as a whole not going to the pace that Bieniemy wants. One of the things he really wants is the team to get to the line quickly, get set, so that the defense doesn't have a chance or is like kind of scrambling, and then they start the motion and now they're confused even more. Like, you want to dictate from a tempo standpoint to the defense, which I love because I thought that's something this offense did terribly last year. And there have been issues with that, not with the quarterbacks commanding the huddle. So I don't anticipate any of the disaster level stuff for Hal on Friday. And then obviously if it's going well, like ball's getting out quick, ball's getting out on time, it looks rhythmic, and ultimately you hopefully get some production. But even if he misses a couple of throws, but the ball looks like it's going where it's supposed to, it looks functional, it looks on time, and it feel like, I hate to say like it feels good, but there's something about offense when it's clicking that there's just a groove to it. It's almost like music where it's just, there's a nice tempo, there's a nice groove, it's on rhythm. And I think if you see that, even if the execution, you miss a block here, you miss a throw here, there's a drop, like that means the offense is probably going to go out and try to clean that up. But to me, that speaks well of Howell specifically and the performance. All right, last two things in our training camp. Pick 6 at 6. Jack Del Rio took the podium today. The Commanders' defensive coordinator talked about a bunch of different things, but amongst them, the kind of focus of the year for his defense. He seems to always have a mantra, a theme. What's this year's?
A lot of attention to detail. Guys have been working hard, taking care of their bodies so they can work hard the next day. And it's just been, it's a process. You come into camp, there's a lot of work to do. If you want to be great, there's no shortcut. You got to put in the work. And our guys have bought into that. We're all accountable. We're working hard together and improving.
That's good. Good to hear. And I think it's funny because interesting, noteworthy, whatever adjective you want to use. Are those adjectives? I don't know. An English teacher, tweet me. I think it's interesting because we've spent so much time focusing on the offense's improvement and just been like, yep, defense is great. But defense has gotten better too. Like, they have continued to coalesce. Their defensive backfield looks fantastic right now. I think their linebackers have gotten better. Logan noted that when we were recording Take Command today. Like, Jamin had a really, really good day of practice yesterday. He's starting to really show himself in coverage. So there's a lot of good signs there. Obviously, the defensive front has been great. More on them in a second. But if they come out and start slow again, people are going to be like, well, cool training camp. So how does Del Rio avoid what has been a bugaboo for this team, slow starts defensively the last couple of years, and specifically last year?
Yeah, you got to be sharp. You got to be on top of it. No mental mistakes. Physically, have yourself trained and ready to go. It's all the details that we're working on. And there's no exact. It's like when you're talking about athletes preparing for a season. There's just a certain level of focus that we have kind of kicked in after experiencing some things early and then growing. Well, we've done that. Now it's time to start fast, and that's going to be, a rallying cry for us for this season.
I think one thing that can help as well is there's a confidence to this defense, and that comes from success. Like, have they been perfect? Have they not given up any plays? No. Like, Terry McLaurin has made plays. He had another one, I think, today that I saw floating around Twitter. Like, Terry's great. Jahan has arguably been the best player in camp. Like, you've had guys make plays. Brian Robinson has sprung a couple of runs. Antonio Gibson sprung a couple of runs. Curtis Samuel sprung a couple of runs, a couple of pass catches. Like, guys have made plays. But that's what it's taken to beat them, is guys making plays, winning one-on-one individual matchups. What's not happening this year is the wide open busted coverage. Like, sometimes you wind up man-to-man and there's a quote-unquote busted coverage and a guy's wide open because he got smoked on the route. Logan referenced one the other day where Jahan he spun Christian Holmes in a circle. Christian Holmes is a second-year, seventh-round pick who's your fifth corner. Jahan is your 1B receiver and one of the best route runners. I mean, certainly the best route runner on the team, quickly becoming one of the better route runners in the division, the conference, and the entire league. And he just hit him with a route, and Holmes fell down. So, yeah, Dotson was wide open, but it didn't come from the mental mistakes, the missed assignments, the miscommunications that were a hallmark of this team, if we're being blunt, all due respect, in the William Jackson III era. So I think that confidence, gives Jack confidence, gives me confidence that this team is going to start just fine defensively this year, that they seem to be on top of their assignments in a way that they were not coming out of the last preseason. Last but not least from Del Rio, last but not least for our pick 6, is he eager to see Chase Young and Montez Sweat in Friday's game for the first time together, certainly healthy in a long time, although they did play, ironically, in Cleveland last year towards the end of the season.
Yeah, it'll be a good time to let players that we don't know as much about, to learn more about them, to look at some of the development of the guys that are here returning, coming back, and roles are being created. You know, one thing we want to do is want to have a lot of usage, roles, packages, things, and we're building towards that right now with what we're doing. So it'll be great to see them in live action.
And actually, my bad. That question was about the line rotation behind Sweat and Young, but I'm glad it's very interesting he answered it that way. One note that I've kind of had in my back pocket that I don't know that I mentioned in a pick 6, but is worth noting. Chase has been doing some one-on-one work and some teamwork lining up at 3 technique. I think this year you're going to see some packages where they're going to try to get an extra pass rusher on the field, and the way they're going to do it is by kicking Chase Young inside. Now, that would theoretically mean that Daron Payne or John Allen comes off the field, which can happen in a certain situation because they're fatigued. They're not like they're going to play a ton of snaps. But as they try to find more backup depth inside, which they have good with F.A. Obata, they have good. Abdullah Anderson's having a hell of a camp. John Ridgway, of course. Phil Mathis, both those guys have been awesome. A faster, more athletic package with Chase, who's strong enough to do it inside, is something that it seems like they're working on. We'll see if it ultimately happens, but it is certainly an interesting thing to have seen in training camp so far. He hasn't quite figured it out yet, but with the athleticism he has, I would bet on him to do so. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app every single day, 6 o'clock during training camp when the Commanders practice. So we'll pick this up again next week. But every single day they practice, we do our training camp pick 6 at 6. When we get back here on the show, Logan Paulsen chimes in on the Eric Bieniemy-Ron Rivera debate. You will not want to miss this next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Little Take Command preview for you now. On the episode itself, we talked at length about our preview for Friday, and I also caught up with Chick Hernandez, who, of course, will be on the play-by-play call for the game on Friday. Really good stuff, including, you might know Chick's nickname is Mr. Chick. I never knew the origin story of that, and I introduced him as Mr. Chick, and he's like, did you know the story? And I said, no, and he's like, and then I said, I would like to know the story, and he told it. So very worth your listen to the full episode, which is available shortly on your favorite podcast platform. Of course, on YouTube at 1067 The Fans page is where the full episodes go, and then some of the segments wind up on my page at Craig Hoffman. But Logan chimed in, and we started the show talking about the Bieniemy comments from Rivera. We recorded this literally hours ago, right before this show. So pretty fresh, and I don't know how much of this is going to be a topic tomorrow as we move forward to preview the game on Friday. So I thought this perspective was super valid. I wanted to let you hear it, and without further ado, here's Logan and I talking about the topic of the day here on Take Command, letting you hear it here on the Team 980. A good old-fashioned Washington football controversy. Coach says something. Media goes nuts. Fans go nuts. I host a radio show imploring everyone to not be so damn dramatic.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, Ron Rivera says some players had come to him about Eric Bieniemy's intensity. He clarified the comments today as if to say, like, look, at the end of the day, like, they went to Eric. They talked it out. We're all on the same page. This is great. He does regret what I thought was a bit of a sloppy comparison to himself and Jack Del Rio and their head coaching experience. Ron clarifies today. You saw the comments yesterday. You've seen all the reaction. As a former player, as an analyst who's been in a lot of locker rooms, what do you make of it all?
I mean, surprise, surprise, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You know, that's kind of my thing on this. Like, it's, you know, especially now, like with certain colleges and the college situation, players coming directly out of college, guys don't get coached the same way in college. And that's just a fact, right? Because of the transfer portal, guys can leave if things aren't going well. And here in the NFL, obviously, you don't have that luxury. It's like here or nothing. And so I think kind of understanding a harder style of coaching is probably to be expected, right? Like, especially if you went to a program where that wasn't a thing. In college, even when I was coming out, like I went to UCLA and everyone was pretty middle of the road in terms of intensity. Like, obviously EB was there when I was in UCLA, so I saw hard coaching. So when I came to the NFL, you know, there were certain coaches like that coached me very, very hard, and I had to adjust to that. And it does take an adjustment period, but at least I knew that style of coaching existed in the coaching universe. And I think there's a lot of kids now, guys that I train and stuff, where it's like, you know, it's sunshine and daisies all the time, and that's just not true of the NFL. And so I think understanding the standard that EB has, understanding the passion that EB has is probably going to take an adjustment period. And like, you know, and I get that. And I think it's like any work environment. If you have an issue, like go talk to your boss. And that's basically what happened. And like, that's happened to me in my career. Not that I felt I needed to go talk to somebody, but other people went and talked to the coach that was in question. And that's life, man. Like, you got to learn how to deal with different personalities and deal with different leadership styles. And like, you know, again, like, and I think Ron was just in his comparison to him and Jack, like they've learned over the course of a very, very long coaching career, of being in positions as a coordinator, as a head coach, of how to like manage personalities just a little bit better. Like, you talk to EB for 5 seconds and you realize he is a very uncompromising dude. And that's something that I respected about him when I played. It's something I respect about him now. So to me, this is just like this. Ron basically said a bunch of facts that I think, and then now everyone's freaking out about it. Like, it doesn't mean that locker rooms screwed up. It doesn't mean that everyone hates EB. It's learning to deal with different types of people.
Right. It was so incredibly human, and people got so mad about it. And I don't get it. And the thing, these players are soft. No, they just hadn't been coached like that before, and they didn't really. The thing that I don't get, Logan, is like, we can talk about all this soft, this like personality, that like there's an efficacy thing here in terms of how effective is Eric Bieniemy going to be as a coach? And how receptive, not because they're quote-unquote soft or because they can't take it, but because they truly don't understand what is being communicated to them, whether it is because of how or like if Eric just yells the same thing over and over again at them, because these are very fast-paced practices like we've talked about a lot, and there's not a lot of room to sit down and talk things out and explain the why, which is something that Eric firmly believes in, that if they weren't getting that, if they weren't getting something they were supposed to, like going and trying to create understanding from perhaps a different source, their head coach, who they might have been more familiar with, is fine. And Ron was like, yeah, you need to go talk to Eric. They do. They get on the same page. Like, that's good. And that's what I just don't get about this is it seemed like people – I think people get confused with my take sometimes because I'm very consistent as like an ideologue. Like I think certain things are true. And when I think that even a person who I might not think highly of does something correct, I'll say it. And when someone who I do think highly of screws up, I'll say that too. And instead, people want me to are used to like, I don't want to call it agendas, but like folks who just have a certain opinion on certain people. And no matter what they do, they will crush them if they don't like them or praise them if they do. And like, I don't think Ron Rivera is the greatest head coach that's ever walked the planet. I think anyone that's listened to me for any length of time knows that. I think Eric Bieniemy is a really, really good offensive coordinator. And so when I didn't just immediately, quote unquote, defend EB as if there's anything that even needed defending, and I actually said there wasn't a huge problem with Rivera, like people freaked out. And I think that's a lot of what's happening here is there was this rush to defend Eric when there was no actual need, and then rush to crush Rivera because people don't like him or don't think he's good. And that created a firestorm around, as you said, a bunch of facts being said pretty mundanely into a microphone.
Yeah, in some ways, I thought it was really nice to get that kind of candor from the coach. You know, like these are like people. You know, Kyle Shanahan is a great example of this. Kyle Shanahan is one of the most detailed, like no nonsense, like high standard coaches that I've ever played for. Early in his career, like, and he'll tell you this, he had a very hard time adjusting to players because his standard was here, and he would communicate things to here. And if you couldn't meet him there, he was going to be very aggressive about it, you know, like quite frankly. And so, you know, like it's kind of that idea, like you have to match my tempo. And I remember talking to him after he left, right after he left Washington. I said, you know, why don't you go be a head coach? There's head coaching opportunities, blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm not ready to deal with like the personalities yet. I need to mature a little bit. And that is a part of the coaching process and journey that I think is so important. And so, you know, like, yeah, man, like I like EB. I would say, as far as I love EB, like he was awesome. You know, when I was at UCLA, like he was the guy that recruited me, like one of these recruiting coordinator into UCLA. We were only there for a year, but like the way he coaches people and the standard he holds people to is awesome. But it's abrasive as heck. You know what I mean? It's like, it's aggressive, and it's like, be here, meet me where I want to be met. And it's like, and it teaches you stuff about yourself, teaches you how to grow up. It's great, but it is hard to deal with if you've never seen it before. So nothing in there is weird. And I think it's good that EB, you know, like has to kind of learn how to communicate. And that's all part of being a coordinator in the process. So I don't think this is an issue at all. I think EB's great. I think Ron's great. I think this is, regardless of what you think about Ron or EB, this situation is like a nothing situation, in my opinion. And I'm sure people in the comments are going to freak out about it, but like these are people interacting with each other and dealing with different leadership styles. And that happens at work, it happens in my new job. It happens with you, I'm sure. Like, it's just part of life, you know? So,
yeah. And the thing is too, like, some of the comments that like I've gotten on my channel on some of the commentary I did on this on Tuesday, like, well, I have a boss that was my way or the highway. And I'm like, did you like working for the guy?
Yeah.
Like, you know, did he actually get the best out of you?
Sure.
Yes, no, probably not. Probably went home and was like, yeah, boss sucked again today. So, like, do you want that experience for the players when the goal is to win, right? You want to get the actual best out of them. And whether they, you know, go home like, damn, EB really was on me again today or not, like the question is, did he get on you and then actually get the most out of you, or did he just get on you and make you mad and kind of shut down and not actually get anything good out of you? Which is why I think what Eric said yesterday was so important, where he's like, I will get on you, but I'm also going to be number one fan. And some guys don't even want to hear that. Some guys I'm cheering for, and they're like, I don't want to hear that. Like, just tell me if I mess up. And it's like, and that's the thing is like there is this adjustment to being constantly at 10, but I think it's an adjustment this team needs. And
I think so too.
I think Ron thinks that, which is why he brought Eric in. I think a lot of key players believe that, which is why they're bought in. And that's the thing is like it's creating that buy-in, which is happening. It's not, and Ron clarified that Wednesday morning, but I fully understood what he meant when his original comments on Tuesday, that there is a level of buy-in that is not instantaneous because it is kind of shocking to the system.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like I agree. Like I knew when he said it, I was like, oh, that's going to be a story. Which in that case, if you want to criticize Rivera and do the very silly theater commentary about this, fine. But hear me out, everybody out there freaking out. What if we just all went, instead of going, oh, that's going to be something, and then turning it into that, we all acted like adults and went, oh, that was interesting. Thanks for the insight, and kept it moving. And I just don't get why we can't just act like adults. But part of the reason is, frankly, Logan, like, you got Booger McFarland, who played in the league and like won Super Bowls on ESPN, freaking out about it. And that's where I'm just like, I would ask you, like, what do you think the locker room reaction was? Because there are plenty of former players that actually were kind of leading the charge on the freak out, if you will.
Well, also, I think we had some people come in and like consult on the show today, right, about how to make the shows more engaging and how to make, like for the Commanders. And one of the things they're always talking about is how do you create conflict? Because people watch conflict, right? So we're not getting to a point where like. But he was kind of peeling back the curtain on some of these bigger TV shows because we don't do this. We just, we're kind of, we're like, we just talk. Fred, Tana, and I, we just talk. He's saying like in the production meeting, they assign perspectives. So they're like, hey, I don't know if this is true. Booger might actually feel this way. I don't want to speak for Booger. But it might be like, hey, Booger, take the stance that you think this is ridiculous. And whoever else take the stance that you think this is fine and go at it. And that leads to good, engaging television because that's how people talk. So I think that's also part of it is that like this is something in a time of year that's kind of slow. Preseason football is not great, and it's going to catch a little bit of heat. So, whatever. Like I'll say, let me just say this last thing. So we had production meetings today for the preseason game, and we got to talk to Jack and EB and Ron and Katzer, all the coordinators. And EB comes in there, and his passion is evident from the second he sits down in the chair. His motivation, his love. And like I haven't played in 4 years or whatever, and I was like ready to run through a wall for the dude. So I'm 100% positive that the guys understand who he is and understand what he's doing, and I have no issue or there's no doubt in my mind that he's the right guy and the right leader for the position. But that even though you're right, doesn't mean you still don't have to kind of accommodate people's individual personalities. And I think that is essentially what the statement said, and. I think, the other thing I think that's important to kind of note is I don't think this happened yesterday. I think this happened during like OTAs, these conversations, right? So like time has passed. They've learned each other. They understand what's going on. Like I really, and people say, Logan, you always downplay stuff. On this, I genuinely believe this is not a big deal at all. Like zero, like it's not a big deal is basically my thoughts on it.
Yeah. You and I are on the same page, and I'm not always one to like, I do think media freakouts are often silly, even though I'm a member of the media. And like, so I said this yesterday on the show. I think this is important. Like the media becomes this conglomerate of actual reporters and fans talking on social media, which I think is very silly because then it becomes like media criticism. It's like no actual reporter said that. But like the outside criticism I think here is just it's people looking to take shots based off preconceived notions, and that's on it. Like I get that Ron could have been more tactful to avoid this, but I also like when people are honest and give candor, and so I appreciated the answer and just think we can handle it as adults, and thus we will move on.
Yeah.
And on that very podcast, we did. We talked about the game. We talked to Chick Hernandez about calling it, and that's available very, very soon. So if you want it as fast as possible, just subscribe. Take command on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Amazon Music, on the free Odyssey app, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Quick break. Come right back. End the show. Real things, real people said into real microphones.
Here's what's trending on the team.
Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I could hear you singing something in the break through the glass as I was editing some of the stuff to post up on YouTube. I could not make out what it was, and that is not what I was expecting. Phenomenal song. But that is not what I was expecting, Anthony Hanney.
Oh, man. That was a song I got put onto when I was in high school.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That was on one of the original Transformer movies, I believe.
It might have been, yeah.
It might have been 2. I don't know. It was one of the early Transformers movies they did that song for.
Yeah. It's a great song.
Linkin Park fun fact for you.
Yes, sir.
All right. We have real things real people said in real microphones. We got some good ones in the folder today, Ant. I don't know how many of these we're going to get to. It means we might just have some tomorrow. But let's get to it right now. It's time for real things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, yesterday, of course, we talked about the story with my buddy Kevin Brown, the absolute ridiculousness of him getting suspended. And it's crazy how that story blew up from like, oh, wow, this is a weird thing that's happening, to every Major League announcer talking about it, SportsCenter. It was on First Take this morning. Last night at Camden Yards, before things went terribly sideways with a walk-off grand slam, I believe, against them. Or I guess it wouldn't have been a walk-off, but top 9 grand slam against them in the actual game. This chant broke out at Camden Yards. That's incredible.
Did you see that the Orioles broadcast on Masson, like, faded down the free Kevin Brown
Yeah,
chant?
I'm sure they did.
And then the TBS one picked it up and carried it.
Right. And there's also a ton of fan video. Like, I just imagine, because, like, so Kevin's apparently scheduled to return to the booth on Friday, which means he's probably watching the game because he's got to prep and he doesn't want to come back and be like, hey, what happened while I was gone? So I do wonder, like, if you're him and you're sitting in your house or your apartment, I don't know, I haven't been to Kevin's place in Baltimore. I can't remember if he's got a house or an apartment or a condo. Where you're sitting on your couch and you're Kevin Brown and you're watching and you hear that, like, I would have goosebumps. I would also be going, what is my life? How did we get here? But good job, O's fans. And do it again. I don't even know if they play tonight. Do it again tonight anyway. Even if you're not playing, just go to the ballpark. Run around in circles. Free Kevin Brown! Free Kevin Brown! Be back tomorrow on Team 980.
Can Eric Bieniemy